welcome
Thank you.
to this broadcast here from Dubai. Our first day here at the Expo,
Yep.
where we will tell the world a little bit about employee lifetime value and how you can work with strategic education or strategic
Professional development.
from a strategic point of view to strengthen the business.
Yeah. Why it's important not to just do it sort of as you go, but actually have a plan for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and we're here in Dubai. I think that we should just start with a little story about what is the World Expo, since we're sitting here with a carpet in the background.
I know it looks like we're on Skagen, but in Denmark, but it is just a carpet actually.
Yeah.
We are sitting here in very warm Dubai.
Yeah. So let's see. This World Expo, in fact, it has a story. It's a 117-year-old tradition where they made this World Expedition where they showed some of the finest things.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite interesting that we're sitting here broadcasting from Dubai at the Expo, because if we look at this story in 1939, it was the first TV broadcast was done on the World Expo in New York back in 1939. So we're just following that legacy of live broadcasting from the Expo. And another funny thing is that if we look at the Expo in 1876, it was the first time that the world saw the telephone. Graham Bell presented the telephone at an Expo. So if we should try to follow how much he has interfered with the world or affected the world, then
Yeah, we sort of built on his invention really in the way we do our training.
Yeah. And we work a lot with mobile learning.
Yeah.
So we could also just say that in 1970 at the World Expo in Osaka, that was the first time that we saw the mobile phone.
Yeah.
So it was a technology that was offered at the Expo. So there's been a lot of inventions discovered and presented at the World Expo, and now we're sitting here follow that legacy, and we'll talk about mobile learning and live broadcasting and everything. So it's just a funny setup to be here.
It is.
Yeah.
And it is very inspiring to be here, because I'm sure that years from now there will have been, we'll have to remember back on this Expo in 2020, which is in 2022, and see, okay, that was one of the things that was presented at this Expo that has had a big effect on the whole world.
Yeah, and we've just been a little bit around, and we can see that there are some inventions like robots delivering food and carbon fiber doors to the gates that are very huge, but without any weight. And I heard that one of the guides was talking about that they will try to use that technology from the gates to build the future of space travels. So a lot of interesting things happens here. But we're not here to talk about the Expo, but I think that we should just jump to today and see how is the Expo looks like today here in the Expo 2020 at Dubai, because that's a huge setup we are in. And as you can see here on the picture, it's a picture of the Expo today. A whole city has been built here.
Yeah, it's quite a big area that this covers, and it was an unexploited area of Dubai before the Expo started. So and it looks, it doesn't look very big on the picture, but it is very big.
Yeah.
And the other day
this morning when we entered with all this equipment to broadcast with, we were stopped in the security, and I needed to go from one gate to another. There are 3 entrances to this, so I took a cab from the one entrance. You can see it, the blue entrance, to the green entrance, and we took the cab and went all the way around the Expo, and we drove 9.3 kilometers. So it just shows how big this is.
Yeah.
And the place we're sitting right now is in the Danish Pavilion. And the Danish Pavilion is where the flag is placed here. So so we are in the Danish Pavilion right now, broadcasting here from the heat.
Yeah.
But should we take a look at today's topic?
Yeah, and today's topic was employee lifetime value.
Yeah.
And we want to just tell you a bit about the employee lifetime value, and connect that to what we started saying, that you had a strategic focus on professional development.
Yeah. It's kind of like an overview of how you build academies for corporate learning with this focus on how can we get more out of the employees, how can we increase the value of each and every employees over time.
On different parameters, really.
Yeah. So this framework, we are inspired by a framework, and then we have taken this learning approach into this framework. And as you can see, when a new employee starts, they start at a level, and then they increases the value that they create over time. This is what we call the onboarding process. So as we onboard a new colleague, they at a certain moment they begin to create value, and over time they become valuable to us, and then they will peak a little higher, and then often they will just stagnate in the development when they just do their job. They become more routine and more effective, but they will stagnate in the development. And at one day they will think, oh, maybe there is greener on the other side, and they will begin to search for job opportunity. And then we can see the value decreases, and when they find the job, it decreases a lot.
They disappear.
Yeah, and then
this white bit here that continues, because you still have the job to fill in, but maybe the employee change. So that sort of cycle goes over and over and over again with new employees. So you can imagine that they were sitting plenty of these whites sort of after each other in the same job.
Exactly. So what we will explain here is how you can use professional development from a strategic point of view to increase this. So if we can take the wide area and then just extend it, we can increase the value of each and every employee. So the first thing we will look at is the pre-boarding, because if we work with pre-boarding, or if a company has a pre-boarding program, we can start on a higher note. So the time from their signing the contract until they begin to create value, the time is just decreased because of the pre-boarding, where they'll learn some things. And we'll come back to what should be in a pre-boarding.
Yeah, for me, pre-boarding is this overlooked part of the sort of employee cycle, where there's a lot of potential to actually sort of accelerate the employees' value in this, and also the time they spend to get up and running.
Exactly. So we can start on a higher note, and we then continue looking into this model. We can also say that, okay, if we then make an onboarding program that are engaging and designed the right way, we can also accelerate the onboarding process, so they will get faster up to speed with the...
So if you can imagine the first bit of the first line from the first two dots, we can make that line steeper.
Yes.
And go up higher.
So we have much faster onboarding or value creation. So if you look at the horizontal line, it's all about the time used, and the vertical line is all about the value you create. And then with an onboarding program, we can accelerate the training and the development, and also increase it. So as they jump up to the place where they should be, they will aim higher. And that comes to the next point, and that is the hiring employer branding process. Because if we can work from an HR perspective strategically with employer branding, we can attract the people that are more qualified. And those will top or peak at a higher level, much higher level than just the ordinary employee.
Plus that you would have your employees become sort of an ambassador for your company. So they'll go out and say, wow, this is a great place to work. They actually invest in my development, and I get a good sort of feeling around working here. So they will go out and sort of sell this workplace and attract even more qualified new colleagues.
And then if we look at the stagnation part, if we can train and develop our employees over time, then we can, with what we call here strategic development, we can increase the value over time also. So this is where we can continue, and we will come back to how can we work with the strategic development. And then we have the last part, the management training part, the culture part of a company, that if we work right with it, we can make sure that people will stay for longer. And then the cycle will be longer, instead of you have many bits with employees just jumping around.
Also because it's very expensive to do this new hiring process and start from scratch with the pre-boarding, onboarding, all those things.
Yes.
So it's a really good idea if you can prolong the employees' period at the company.
Yeah. So what we will today is just dig into each of these points and say, okay, here are some recommendations for what to be aware of in the pre-boarding, onboarding, employer branding, and strategic development and management culture. And I'm sure that those that are looking today have worked with some of these areas, and maybe you can be inspired from this to just take a look at your program today, or maybe develop it and extend it. So let's hope we can inspire some out there.
Yes.
So should we start by looking a little bit about around the pre-boarding phase?
Let's do that.
Yeah. So pre-boarding is the part where we have a sign on a contract until the first day.
Yeah.
So what should we be aware of in the pre-boarding process?
Well, as I said before, there's great potential in the pre-boarding process because it's often overlooked that you can actually use that period. And I know that in some companies there's a long time from the hire till they start, so there's a bigger potential there. Some places it's like 3 days, and then of course that the amount of content put in the pre-boarding needs to be sort of adjusted accordingly. But what we found out is that something like introduction to the company, the history, the values, the strategy, all that, that's usually something people put in the onboarding, so like the first few days, and that's actually the worst idea possible. Do it anytime else but there, because they can't go into that, like the mental capacity is not fit for dealing with these things. But a good idea is to put it into the pre-boarding. That's where you have a very engaged new employee that think, yes, I've just signed this contract, I look forward to it, I want to tell people that I've got a new job, all these things. And both for their sake, they can say, okay, now I actually have time and mental capacity to look into the company history, to learn all these things that isn't really something they have to use the first day. That gives them a sort of a grounded feeling that, yes, now I actually know what kind of business I'm going into. And even more important, that when people say, no, what is this new work you've got? And what kind of company is that? That's quite difficult to answer that question if you haven't done anything but just have a quick look over the website. So in pre-boarding, it's a very good idea to start teaching history, values, all these things. Yeah.
You're intensely motivated to understand the business from a bigger perspective.
Yeah.
So
and also some of the things that are very important to know before the first day. So I'm sure we've all been sitting at the first day of a new job, and people around you are using all sorts of phrases and abbreviations and stuff like that, and you have absolutely no idea what it means. It's like the FNP blah 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 something, and you're just like, what's that? And it's very difficult to have a conversation with your new colleagues if you don't know these things. So help the new employee and give them some training in these sort of words, expressions, all of this.
Yeah. All this short-term memory, we can boost that if we design the pre-boarding in the right way with maybe what we call flashcards or things like that. We can use the technology to help us boost the short-term memory to remember all these words and expressions. So.
And it will, it will give the new employees sort of a more comfortable feeling, and going in the first day feel like you're belonging in this place because you can actually talk with your new colleagues about these things.
Just to give an example on it, it could also be something else than words and expression. It could also be if you work at a restaurant. It could be to memory the menu card, so you are familiar with the menu card before your first shift, and that couldn't be built into flashcards or other systems. So just think about what could be crucial for a new employee to know
before the first day.
So when they have their first shift, their first day, what could be a good idea? And it's quite simple to find out what it is. Just to go out and ask some of the employees you just have hired and ask them
what would you like to know before you started.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the third
And
thing?
the third thing is
Yeah.
sort of the practicalities around work. When we ask people what they find the most important to know before they come the first day, a lot of them say some quite sort of down-to-earth things, like where am I going? Who am I going to meet? Am I going to bring lunch myself, or is there sort of a lunch
Mm-hmm.
thing at work? Where do I park my car? All these things that maybe we forget when we work. We've worked at a company for a long time,
Yeah.
but that's actually very important when you start.
There's
Just-
a lot of things that we take for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, history, values, etc. All the expressions or sort of need to know things before the first day, and then all the practicalities. That's three very important areas you could work with in the pre-boarding.
Cool.
Mm?
So if we then look at the next stage, the next part of an employee journey, the lifetime journey, then we come to the onboarding.
Mm.
And we have made a lot of onboarding programs over time and assisted companies in designing those. And as you said, one of the things that we see is often that when a new employee starts, they start at the headquarters to an introduction about the history, the values and everything. And the only thing they are focusing on is what was the name of my colleague. So in an onboard program, I believe that the architecture should be in another order. And there are plenty of ways or plenty of approaches to design an onboard program, and we'll just explain one of them. And that is being aware of the close things to start with, and then
Yes.
over time focusing on the more corporate.
So it's a bit like if you cut sort of an onion in two, and you see all the rings there,
Yeah.
and then you put the employee in the middle, and then you start by teaching the things that are close to the employee, like the inner ring of the
Yeah.
onion, and then you start putting on the layers.
Exactly. So if we just focus on the close things, an approach to an onboard design is to answer the questions that your new employees they have. So if we just show some of the questions here, so one of the first questions is what was the name of my colleague? And if you think about that in an onboard program, it's important that we, in the start of a program, show them the names of their
A
they call
photo
it-
maybe.
a photo. Yeah. We work with a big contractor, and in fact, at all tables, they have their
Some name tag,
name sign, name tag, so new colleagues faster can remember what was the name, so they doesn't feel dumb asking, oh, what was your name?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because it can be quite overwhelming
Yeah.
the first
first time,
even more than the first day. I mean, the first few weeks is a bit.
exactly.
Um,
So and then we can continue.
Yeah,
with
it could
the
be where's the toilet, or
Exactly.
where is the coffee machine, or
Things
what
like that.
time is the lunch break?
Yeah,
Or,
all these things we take for granted.
Yeah.
And then we continue.
yeah, then we go a bit further out in the onion, really, and say, okay, but now I've learned who works in my team, then I need to understand who works in the other teams surrounding my team, and even more sort of, okay, and how do we collaborate between those teams? How do we work internally? And then we can add even more layers, okay, bigger perspectives on where my business unit, where is it going, what's the trajectory for what we are doing, and also the whole thing about the company, all in all, where's that moving, what's happened before, where are we headed. And then even further out and even further away from your little, sort of your own little desk, is the how do we collaborate with sort of externally outside the company, what kind of partners or suppliers or something like that do we have that sort of feed in to our company, and at the end probably, okay, how do we actually support the bigger vision and strategies for the company.
Yeah. So the design should be focused on what questions is it that our new colleagues need answers to, and then we can design an onboarding program on that.
It's all about sort of timeliness.
Yes.
Um,
Explaining the right things at the right time.
Yeah. Exactly.
So this is a way to design an onboard program, and also something that you can go home to your own onboard program that you maybe if you already have one, and just say, do we answer the right questions at the right time? That's a good dialogue to have in an HR department.
Yeah, map it out.
Hmm?
And usually you'd find that, of course, you can't just have one kind of onboarding program for all employees.
No.
It needs to be sort of in strands depending on what they're doing. So you probably need to have different sort of ways to do onboarding.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, should we continue to see what happens next after the onboarding if you want to increase the employee lifetime value?
Yep. Off to the employer branding.
Yeah. And employer branding is a thing that people think it's maybe they will think that it's weird that we put it into to the strategic development, but I really believe that if we look at the knowledge that are built in a company, that the knowledge they already have inside the company, that if we can bring that out, we can increase how they cooperate in a company, and we can also share best practice or next practice. And if we look at employer branding, we have done a lot of these small testimonials from internal employees. So instead of hiring consultants outside the company, you should focus on who is the hero in our company, who is it that really knows some stuff about some special areas, and then bring them in front instead. Because the moment that you see a colleague explaining things, you can relate in another way to that colleague, and you can relate to the things that are explained. So we always suggest that when you produce content, try to use your own employees, try to use them and make them the heroes.
Yeah, and maybe not just use the CEO, but
No.
use actually people on the floor.
Exactly.
Because they are the ones that sort of keeps the wheels running in the company. And it's difficult to relate to your CEO, say, sort of teaching everything. It's very good that he says something about the bigger lines in the company, but how to do other things, it might be better to get someone who actually does it.
Exactly. And it comes back to this engagement strategy. So when we look at employer branding, we could also look at what is our engagement strategy. How do we engage both the employees that we already have, and how can we use that engagement to, on the other side, attract more qualified people to make sure that we are hiring the most qualified people on the market. So we call it also, we say that we work with psychological safety, which is from a big Google study around high performance teams. If we can make sure that everybody feels embraced in the collaboration and feel this psychological safety, then they will work much more effective. And when we are taking the employees internally and make them the heroes and let them explain why this is a great place to work, and use that both in the pre and onboarding, but also use that in the engagement platforms, then we can really show everybody that here is a safe place to work. This is psychological safety also. And I think that we also see a shift the last year or two in going from these classic intranet solutions to more dynamic engagement platforms.
Yeah, so it almost becomes the company's social media kind of thing, where you push these things out, you can comment, you can like, you can get some everyday sort of look and feel from the company and all the divisions maybe.
Yeah. And these internal social walls should be, we need to push out internal materials with our own people in the company, not some external experts.
Yeah.
It's also okay to use external experts if they have a message that they could explain, that could inspire, but primarily it should be our own people.
Yeah, exactly.
So this will help us attract people that will peak on a higher level, and then we still need to develop them over time. And this is where we come to the place we call the strategic development, where we primarily work with these incremental changes, these small changes constantly, and try to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday.
Yeah, and it has two effects really. It both have the effect that of course, you can get more value out of your employee if you keep investing in their development. But it also gives the employee a sense of caring from the company. I'm actually working in a place where they want to invest in me as a person and support my development.
And it also brings us over to one of our philosophies, or one of the tools that we really think is fantastic, the 1% rule. And if we can just increase our knowledge every day, become a little bit better today than we were yesterday, and again a little bit better tomorrow, it accelerates. And we have just made an animation that shows us what happens if we just improve with 0.5% every day, and that's dramatically. So in the start, it doesn't improve that much, but over time, the potential in a 100-day program is 65%.
Yeah, and that's where you have to think learning as not a sort of one-off thing. You say, we'll just send everybody on this course, and then they will get super much more efficient. But instead thinking, okay, we want to do something else. We want to add a little bit extra on every day, because they also have to look after their proper job.
Exactly.
It's not only there for development.
Yeah, and we can say that formal training will focus on the 10% of the professional development, where the strategic development is more focused on the 70% of just doing my job, professional development.
Exactly.
So we can really extend it by using these, and it doesn't have to be a 100-day program. It could also just be, okay, let's try to map up what is it that our employees should know, what knowledge should they have access to, and then try to push it out over a year, and then try to push it out over a year instead. So they every week or maybe every second week get a little bit of knowledge that they can work with. So let's continue to the thing that is important to focus on. If we'll just look at how we can make sure that the people will stay for longer.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious for us actually, and because we've talked to a lot of people, that one of the big reasons why people leave is because their nearest manager is problematic with that. So that's often the reason they use for leaving. It's
people don't leave a job; they leave the manager.
Yeah. Exactly.
In many cases.
Yeah, and therefore, if you could work with the management culture and improve their management skills, then you will have your employees for a longer time.
Yeah, and what we'd like to explain here is just an approach on management training or management culture training, and that's because we would really like to address the thing about how we can increase diversity in management and in the company culture, and also increase the inclusion, because classic training courses, management courses, where you just put 15 or 20 leaders together in a classroom for 2 or 3 days, it does some great things, but often you see that it is the same 4 or 5 people that are asking the questions and commenting on the teaching. So we need to find a way to design a leadership program where everybody is involved in the program to make sure we have the inclusion. And we also are focused on that everybody should say something and participate in the dialogue to increase the learning. And we have developed this hybrid learning model, and we use that for management training, because we know that the moment you become a leader, you're also responsible for your own development and your own time, and there's a lot of taking responsibility as a leader or manager. And if we take that responsibility together with our understanding of what is good leadership, combined with the diversity and inclusive focus, then this hybrid learning process or method is just so effective. So maybe you should just explain the method shortly to explain how does it work.
It starts by that everybody gets the basic training or key knowledge about a part of the management training.
It could be motivation or engagement.
A lot of different topics, but just get the key concepts and you could do that individually, and you could do it whenever it suits you regarding calendar and so on. So it's a asynchronous activity.
Yeah.
And then you meet up with peers. It's very important that you sit with managers that are roughly on the same level as yourself, because what you want is to flatten out the hierarchy in the conversation, so everybody feels comfortable in saying something.
The bubble of trust.
Yeah.
To build the bubble of trust in these small network groups. Yeah.
And then it needs some facilitation from either internally or from someone like us, where the managers have a safe and open talk about both the key concepts that they've learned, but also their practice. So what they're doing there in their dialogue is to use the key concepts and applying it to their management practice and their experiences as managers. What we see here is an opportunity to work with management diversity, where not everybody is managing the same way or has the same problems or challenges, but there's an open space for actually chipping in with that. So they do their sandbox training together, where they say, okay, what do I need to act in other ways when this situation occurs? Do I have some other possibilities to do have another kind of behavior? And then we go back to wrapping that sandbox discussion, training, whatever you'd call it up, and pinpointing, okay, what is the aim now? Do these managers go out and do A, B, C when the situation occurs again? So you make it clear what the actions are from moving forward from here.
Yeah.
And then they go out and try it in their everyday life as a manager, and then that feeds back into the next loop where some new key concept training is started.
So it's a learning loop that continues, because there is an output which we are using in a later cycle, and then we continue the learning. That's why we also call our approach continuous learning in all of this.
So you build on top of things all the time until you've been around the whole management framework.
Yeah, and just to address the thing about diversity is great, but diversity will first be valuable the moment we begin to listen to each other, because diversity gives us different perspectives on tasks and challenges. And the moment we can use diversity into the solutions, we will find better solutions, because we will build on top of our different ideas and approaches and cultural understanding and everything.
And use your peers actively, instead of sort of saying, well, this is my business, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah. So we need to build the bubble of trust to make sure that all of this comes in play.
Yeah.
So this was a tour around all the small steps, and if we then look at this employee lifetime value, then with all of this, focusing on pre-boarding to start on a higher note, focusing on onboarding to accelerate the training, focusing on employer branding to attract the more qualified employees and make sure that there are a high engagement in the company, and focusing on strategic development so everybody just becomes a little bit better every day. And then also focus on the management training to make sure that we keep our employees for a longer time. Then we can in fact increase the employee lifetime value a lot.
Yeah.
So and up to 250% in increasement, which is a huge increasement in the value of each and every employee.
So you both get more value out of your employees, but you also have some savings around rehiring, recruitment, all these things.
Yeah. So just to wrap all this up, if we are asking the question, is it a good investment to focus on people development? Is it a good investment to focus on people culture? Is it a good investment to to put money into or resources into the HR department to help them focusing on all these areas? Then we can say from this perspective that it is a quite good investment to focus on this.
Yeah.
And often we are challenged in the ROI calculation on, okay, is it a good investment? And
it is models like this, the employee lifetime value, that can really help us create these effective learning strategies and show the value of it, because it's the sum of all of this that can do things. So I believe that it's a good idea to invest in people. That's also why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I didn't have that belief, I would sit somewhere else, I think. But it just shows it so well, the employee lifetime value. So try to go back and reflect a little bit about how your company is working with the employee lifetime value. Do you have a pre-boarding setup? Do you have an onboarding strategy? Are you making sure that your employees are the heroes of the day? Do you make sure that you make these incremental development over time? And do you have a training program that makes sure that there are a lot of inclusion and diversity in the leadership training? And this leadership training, that it's not something it is a burden for the leader, but it is something that helps the leader become better at what they do.
Yeah, I think that's it for today.
Yeah, so thank you for watching us here, broadcasting. And
remember that we also do other broadcasts. We have a few more days to go where we're broadcasting about other things.
So follow us.
Yep.
Hang on. And we will jump back to downstairs here in the pavilion to talk with more people today.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.